Men are containers of responsibility. I was gifted such an intense experience that most other kids weren't. And how could I really lean into this? They see their health as something separate from the rest of their life. You cannot out-exercise a bad diet.
What's up, Anthony? It's good to see you, brother. Good to see you again, I should say.
Good to see you again too.
Yeah, man.
I love your energy. I love communicating with you. I love the fact that we're about to have a badass deep conversation. I can just feel it.
Heck yeah, man. I am really excited about this. I love this subject. I love health and fitness. I think I love it because I know all the benefits that go with it. You know, obviously the physical benefits, but like the mental, emotional benefits that go with it. But also the fact that we can measure it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you can it's die hard measuring, of
Mm-hmm.
where you're at and where you want to go. It's like health and wealth, the two areas of our lives we can like put some serious metrics around. But I'm curious, how did you start Fit Father Project?
Right. Well, as you can probably guess and imagine, like growing up, it wasn't my life goal to be a men's fitness coach. I grew up in upstate New York, had a very normal childhood, I would say. I have a younger brother named Nick, and I just remember us riding bikes, eating crab apples off the tree, and just having an amazing childhood. What was unique about my childhood, though, is I did watch my father basically work himself to the bone. He was in the computer leasing industry, and he was just busting his butt to put food on the table. And I just would sleep at the office, very stressed all the time. And a great dad, but his physical health was on the back burner. And this was probably when I was around 5 or 6 years old. We were living in Toronto, Canada at the time, born in New York, but we moved out there. And one night, my dad, fell out of bed, and we heard the crash upstairs from my parents' bedroom, and he had a violent seizure. And if you've ever
Gosh,
seen, someone have a seizure, it's terrifying, right?
it's
They're
horrible.
completely out of control, they're writhing, and it's like you can tell that the normal lights that you see is that person, that they're not on, they're not in this kind of conscious control, let alone to see your dad, the man you look up to that much in that scenario. So when the seizure ends, we rush him to the hospital, and the doctors do MRI, blood tests, and that's the night we find out my dad has terminal brain cancer. And so things change very quickly when, you get that diagnosis. He must have been in his late 30s at the time.
Late
My
30s?
right, right,
Wow.
devastating,
Yeah.
devastating. He has me, I'm around 6, my brother must be around 2 years old. And a big wake up call for him. The doctor says, get your affairs in order. And my dad hears something different. He says, it's time to fight. And so over the next couple of years, he goes through all the possible treatments. And this was in like the 80s and the 90s. So the technology was not the same as it is today. So, brain surgery, he had 2 of those, chemotherapy, radiation. I saw my dad's physical health like dwindle while his spirit still wanted to fight for our family. And it really shaped my understanding of health from a very young age, because it was inescapable for me to realize that as a parent, your physical strength, health, and capacities is completely linked to your ability to show up. And when you begin to lose your physical health, you lose this basis. And my dad continued to fight, and he got tired at the end of it after many, many years. And he ended up dying when he was 42. And it was just a couple months before my 10th birthday.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that rocked our family, as you can imagine. And before he died, he moved us from Toronto, Canada to where I live now in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I think he just wanted to get us set up with like a new kind of life, and just a fresh start from my mom. And I'm 9, right? And so I'm at an age where I really can feel the pain and understand the significance of this. I'm at an age where I'm kind of starting to transition into understanding what a man is. And, I felt this call to really like step up, to help my brother out, to grieve with my mom. And having just moved, it was like probably the low point of my life. Felt so freaking alone. I remember my 10th birthday, had no new friends. My dad just died. But my mom did give me a pair of my dad's old dumbbells that, kind of like as a symbolic little gift. And I didn't know how important that was at the time, but it was really meaningful. I felt like it represented strength. It represented my dad and a gift I could carry on. And I started like basically putting these dumbbells under my bed, and my mom would tuck me in at night, and I would pull them out and I would train. And I didn't know what I was doing, but it was kind of intuitive. I just knew that I had so much anger and pain in my body that when I started to move and exercise and do curls and push-ups and squats, that I just felt better. And I did this for basically a whole year: push-ups, squats, curls every night. And I noticed too that I started to heal. Like my body was starting to change. I started to get these little biceps, and I was getting a little more attention at school. And I noticed that I could channel this inner turmoil and chaos into order through my will and through discipline with exercise. And that led into eating healthy as well. And it transformed me. It transformed me. I became physically strong. I became mentally sharp. I started to see my dad's death as something that was the significant pillar in my life to launch me into this next new chapter of becoming a man and becoming strong. And in my mind, becoming so strong that cancer wouldn't affect me. And there's a lot of life that's happened since then, but the next couple decades became all about learning as much as I could about the body, starting to share this and help other people. And several decades later, I end up in medical school, and I see a lot of people like my dad. You know, they want to do better with their health. They can't figure out how to make it all work with the dynamics of a busy family life. And you know, just from the wisdom and perspective of getting older, I understood the mental emotional component of this is so deep. And I also knew how integrated health is to a good life and to being a dad. So I started the Fit Father Project, been running that for 10 years. We've had around 60,000 guys go through the program all over the world. We've seen so many lives change. And I think this work is as important now in our culture today than ever, because so many dads want to do better and so many dads are struggling with health. And I believe it's probably one of the biggest areas of opportunity for men if they don't have this dialed in. And if you do have this dialed in, there's always more that you can do, more levels of performance and clarity and strength and integrity. And that's why I do this work, and I'm so passionate.
Are you okay if we go back just to the loss of your dad? Because that is
Yeah.
just 42 years old. You're 10.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And dude, we're super close.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy that you're telling me this story right now, because when I put him to bed last night, like my son was asking me, he's like, Dad, you're gonna be 50 next year, right? And I go, yeah. He goes, well, isn't that old? Aren't you like close to dying? And I'm like, I just like, I kind of laughed and I was just like, I could. I was like, we never know when our time card's going to be punched. You know, it's like I could go tonight, you know, I could go tomorrow, I could go in, I could have another 30 years. I have no idea. And neither do you. I was like, but here's what I do know. I was like, you know, I'm gonna live each day as my last. I'm gonna be the healthiest version I can possibly be. And I'm gonna put as much as I can, you know, in the prevention area to make sure that I'm as healthy as possible for as long as possible.
Yeah.
But I asked him this question. I go, why are you asking me this? And he just kind of got quiet there for a second. And he goes, because one of my friends' dads died not too long ago. And I've been thinking about it, that what would it be like if you weren't here? And he's like, and I can't imagine that. I can't imagine like you not being here. And I think that was his way of like, he would at this age at 10 years old, it's like he's right at that age of like understanding what's happening, right? But
Right.
also completely and totally does not feel any type of control whatsoever. And there's a huge part of him that doesn't understand all that as well. It's
Mm-hmm.
like this sort of limbo age of like
Yep.
lots of clarity, lots of confusion and everything in between, but also an age where you definitely need a dad, especially if you're a boy, right? So like, how did you deal with that?
Mm. Well, you know, what I love about life is when we get dealt challenges, like in the seed of that challenge is the opportunity for triumph, for conquest. And it seems to me in all the great stories and heroes' tales that there's always aid that comes in the darkest hour. And for me, there was a lot of great mentors and coaches in my school that I feel like stepped up as men to provide fathering energy. I had an amazing baseball coach in middle school named Mr. Fernandez. And looking back, this guy he was in his mid-20s at the time, but I thought he was an old man, and he really helped fill in and ensure me up and provide that masculine supportive energy. My mom also definitely transformed in the process. You know, to be a single mom raising two kids, I think she took on a new kind of energy, providing a lot more order and structure and strength that was so nourishing at the time. But I'd also say it brought me to a place of finding my own inner strength, to find a certain amount of rugged self-reliance that this is so. There is no going around this. This happened in my life. Now, what are you going to do about it, kid? And the answer was step up and light fire in my heart, and build inner strength, and push harder to overcome. And in fact, this is the kind of mental gymnastics I kind of stumbled upon. It's like, how could I even see this as a good thing? How could I even see this as an asset in a sense? Like, I was gifted such an intense experience that most other kids weren't. And how could I really lean into this and see this as a really significant and beautiful experience? And I think the only reason I got there was because the pain was so tremendous that moving deeper into that pain wasn't serving me, wasn't bringing me this experience of life energy, wasn't filling me up and giving me positivity and lift. And I guess now that I really reflect back and even say this out loud, I think that is now my fundamental deep understanding of health itself. These are behaviors that give us life energy. These are thinking patterns that give us life energy, things that fill us up and move us forward into strength, into creation, into productivity, into integrity. So it happened, brother. I can't say it was exactly a super conscious process, but it happened. And I also say exercising and training changes your neurochemistry in such a profound way. I remember, late at night when I go on runs and my lungs were burning, when I'd stop and walk back home, like I felt so alive. So I think I had to learn how to tap into my internal pharmacy in a bit. I also went to great schools. My mom was so big on education, and the public school system here in Arizona is not necessarily the best. She got me into an all boys Catholic school called Brophy here in Arizona. And so I was surrounded by a lot of men. There was a lot of influence of good, strong men in order that I guess kept me on the rails. And I had great friends too, probably a byproduct of being in good schools. So I think the combination of those factors really helped me thrive.
Wow. Wow. That is definitely a redemption story, and not one that I expected to, especially after losing your dad at such a young age. You mentioned that your mom really stepped into that role
Mm-hmm,
of being a single parent. You even use the adjective nourishing.
mm-hmm,
For someone who's grieving, the loss of her husband, the father of her kids, at such a young age. It's fascinating to me. Like, what did you see your mom do specifically? Because like, and here's the
yeah.
reason I asked this question, right? For the audience's sake, is that every guy listening to this podcast, we see the world through our eyes, right? We see the
Mm-hmm,
world as firsthand experience, right? So we see our wives, we see our kids and all that. What I would love for you to do though is give these men a different perspective and a different view. And that is the view from a son to his mom or his parent or his leader, his guardian, right? And what she did to recover. And the cool thing too about this whole thing, and I'm not trying to make it sound like it's cool, but the interesting thing about this is that you were 10.
mm-hmm,
So you are still sort of, you're noticing these things, right? You remember these things.
mm-hmm.
And it doesn't maybe make sense at the time, but I'm curious as to looking back, what did you see and how has it changed you as a parent?
In the beginning, first months and maybe even year, there's just such a deep grieving process. Like,
Oh yeah,
and
I can
everyone, I'm
imagine.
sure most people listening to this have grieved something significant in their life. And you can look up the stages of grief and that you can run through. And there's all the feelings of denial, anger, acceptance, bargaining, all these things. And I feel like my mom was going through those, but it was really, I did not have the awareness at the time to understand the significance of all those stages. But I do remember like holding my mom and crying with her in the closet. Like, I guess I was the closest thing she had to another man, another adult to like hold and grieve with. And it was a powerful bond my mom made because my brother just didn't get it. He wasn't quite there. So there was a lot of that. What was amazing about my mom is she needed to step up to provide for our family. Like, dad breadwinner was gone. So what she did was she actually learned how to trade stocks and day trade. She got some computer monitors set up in her office. She'd have the charts printed out all over the place. She joined a trading group and she figured that being in Arizona, she could wake up early. East Coast markets are up. She could trade for a few hours and then get us to school. And she did that for about 10 years and was able to provide for our family, day trading in the morning on her computers in these trading groups. And she was able to provide for us. Yeah, absolutely incredible. Like I don't think it was just kind of like normal when it's just your family in your life to think about that. But like, that's exceptional when I say it. And I get chills to think about like how badass that was that my mom did this. And this was like probably in like the early 90s before everyone had all these trading apps in their phones and all that stuff. So really amazing.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy.
Hmm.
Did your mom ever get remarried?
She did. I remember that period of her dating other guys was like, man, that was an experience for me to be
Yeah.
able to really like open my heart and accept that she was moving on. Like, what does this mean in terms of her relationship to my dad? What does this mean in terms of my relationship to my dad? How can I let someone else in? But after, going through several different guys, she finally met this guy named Jim, who's now my stepdad. And man, I love him. I
Oh
love
my
him so
gosh.
much. And he's been in my life for, almost like, 20 years. And so she did remarry. He's amazing. They have an amazing life together. And there is a happy and beautiful ending to this. And yeah, we have a new extended blended family, and my mom is very happy.
This is so unique. Like you never like hear these things that have happy endings. What is it about? You said his name's Jim.
Yep.
What is it about Jim you love so much? Because you just came to life when you talked about him, and you're just like, man, this guy's great. Like, what makes him great?
Yeah. I think he's one of the, on paper, one of the most successful guys you could probably meet, but he's also one of the most humble grassroots guys. Jim's life story: he grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, to a poor family. They made ends meet, but they all lived together with the grandparents in a house, many kids, and his dad was an alcoholic, and he had a drive because of that to really make himself great. So he became, class president in his school when he was in high school and wanted to make himself something. When he was in his early 20s, he got a $300 loan from his sister, and he started his construction company. So he's now 70, and he's been running that same construction company for about 50 years. Um, and he's had as many as 2,000 employees. He has impacted so many people's lives, and you wouldn't know it by just seeing him on the street driving his beat up car, with so much just integrity, leadership, and love. He's an amazing guy. He's a guy who became, as much of a role model for me as a dad. He didn't step through and feel like he needed to, excuse me, parent me, but he's been, just without words, a huge inspiration for me.
Did he ever pay back that 300 bucks?
Yeah, oh, for sure. For sure. For sure.
How old were you when Jim came around?
I was, man, I'll tell you a hilarious story about this. This actually kind of solidified our entry into our relationship. I was a teenage boy, which means hormones were raging, hidden puberty. This time I was lifting for several years. And I remember he came over one night for like a game night. My mom was really going to like introduce him to us. And we played a game of Twister. You got the red hand, the circles on the ground, and you got to spin it, and you got to put your right hand on red, left foot on yellow. And I'm playing with my brother, and he's doing the spin thing, and we're having a little bit of a family night, and I'm warming up to Jim. I am wearing these pajama pants that, just like loose baggy pajama pants. I think they had like flames on them or something like this. And, my shirt's off, and I've got my little bit of a pump, and I'm feeling a little like masculine around him. Like, this is a man coming into my house, and I've got the testosterone going. We're playing Twister, and I'm like kind of twisted up with my brother, and he spins it. And as he does, my junk falls out of these pants and falls onto my brother, and I don't notice because it's all loosey goosey, but Jim does, and my mom gasps, and he says like "wiener on yellow" or something like this.
Oh,
And my little brother, 3 years younger than me, freaks out. Like, he's screaming, he runs away. I turn beet red, I run away.
oh
And
my
I feel
God,
like it
that's
was one of
great.
those moments that just disarmed me so deeply. Just it was such a powerful, hilarious, beautiful moment that after that, like, I feel like it discharged all this kind of like machismo I'd built up with this man. And I was just a teenage boy with his penis out, and it was hilarious. And yeah, it's a memory that stuck. I feel like after that I softened, and Jim and I have been great ever since.
You've used a lot of puns in this, of discharge and softened and all this other
Oh,
stuff
it's
when you're
hilarious.
talking about your penis.
Damn. Well, That was not intended, but man, the subconscious mind is powerful.
Oh my God, that's great, man. What an incredible, funny icebreaker that must have
Right?
been. Um, that's cool, man. So just out of curiosity, did it take you kind of like this learning curve, in a way to not to warm up to gym? The reason I ask is because, a guy who's, close to his dad, and dad just unfortunately tragically goes way earlier than, his time, and there's probably a lot of feelings about that, right? And then suddenly this guy enters in. Was there ever a time where you were just like, yeah, I'm not accepting this too much right now? Or were you accepting like more right away?
He did a great job of not trying to be my dad at first.
Okay.
He had a great job of being a friend and being, someone who's courting my mom. And he saw my deep interest for health and fitness and he leaned into it. He started buying me muscle and fitness magazines and helping me with exercise equipment. So I think he was just so beautifully, artfully got into my life and my heart from a oblique way, not trying to come in, stomp, and be my dad. And my mom was very strong and like it filled that space so powerfully. Jim also had, 5 of his own kids, so he had a lot of experience on that front as well. But it was just such a gradual, beautiful build. Yeah, he never overstepped. He taught me through everything that wasn't said, just through who he was. And I think I learned from him even more when I became more mature and became a man to see how beautiful and great he really was. But leaning into my interests was his way in.
Oh, that's so cool. Did 5 kids. So when did you guys become like this blended family, and five plus how many in your crew?
Well, he had the kids when they were older than I was. So his youngest were twin girls and they were already basically almost out of high school by the time we were dating. So when mom and Jim got married, we didn't do the whole blended house family thing,
Okay.
which I felt like was kind of cool. Like we got to have Jim in, but it kind of felt very similar. And now we have this huge family network because all of the kids have kids and we have this beautiful big family.
Well, I'm so happy, man, that this really turned out well for you, because it could have been, I mean, I'm sure obviously it was hard, right? But like having like this man come into your life, it sounds like it was just such a blessing, right?
For
Is
sure. And yeah,
Go ahead.
and the fact that I got to figure out something I was so passionate about at a young age because of that.
Yeah.
Like to be a teenager and know that you're like all into this whole health and fitness stuff, something I could pour into, something I could build my confidence on, something that was like an endless source of learning and inspiration for me. Like, well, that's worth so much. Like many kids find it through sports, maybe through academic pursuits, music, whatever. Like, I found mine in, I guess you could say, like health and bodybuilding. And it was so beautiful.
That was so cool. And then you competed in bodybuilding too, right?
I did.
How many? Yeah, go ahead.
I competed for about 10 years. I did my first
Wow.
bodybuilding show when I was 18 and basically competed for about a decade. And it was cool because I competed before Instagram existed, before fitness was like a kind of a cultural thing. It was really for me, and it was a very niche thing to not only train and love to lift weights, but then to go through all the process of, tanning yourself, the really intense diet, putting on the thong, getting on stage, learning how to
On the
flex.
thong.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. It's really
Yeah.
interesting, but I loved it. It took me around the United States. I met so many people and had a lot of powerful experiences that people don't get until older in life. I was successful at it. I can't say, in terms of the giftedness of a bodybuilder, I was probably middle of the pack, middle upper. Like I have good genetics, but not the best to go Ronnie Coleman style, obviously. But I did win a national championship in Las Vegas when I was 22, and that was amazing.
Dang.
Yeah,
Wow, dude, that is impressive. That's very impressive. A lot of people, I think they don't really realize how hard that sport is. I competed in bodybuilding myself I did from 1995 to 2002, and then I did another show in 2011.
hmm
And then my 14-year-old, he's now 16, in 2022. He's like, "Hey, Dad, let's compete in a bodybuilding show together." And I laughed at him. I was like, "No, I'm not doing that." He's like, "We get to work out together every day," and I'm like, "All right, let's do it." So,
that's
and
cool.
we did it and we entered in. But I think a lot of people think like, "Oh, you just it's like this vain sport or whatever else, you know, and the posing and all this other stuff. I'll tell you, man, like you really have to pull some serious mental resilience and mental toughness levers, not to mention the physical aspect of it, but the
Mhm.
discipline to stay on point with that diet, you know, to do your cardio, to do your
Yep.
weight training, like you're exhausted, you're dieting down. And then the posing thing on top of it, like that's like an art thing.
Yep.
A lot of people think it's super simple, but you have to like number one, know how to do it. And number two, you have to angle your body to where the judges can actually see you. Like you can have the best physique on the planet, not know how to show it and completely botch your show. But
True.
there's a lot that goes into it, a lot. And I'm curious though, why did you start Fit Father Project? What was the motivation behind that?
Well, before I actually had started, I've been competing in bodybuilding for many years, and it was a cool experience to understand the fitness side of it at such a high level. Like, what do the most intense nutrition and exercise plans look like? And then what actually like matters for a busy dad who doesn't want to be a bodybuilder, but like, what are the things that move the needle nutritionally and with exercise? So I began to extract these things, and I knew I wanted to share when I'd had so much success with my body, and it's transformed me to such an extent. I started writing ebooks and building websites and just wanting to get the information out there. And then realizing that at my heart, guys like my dad were really who I had a deep passion to serve. Like I just know how devastating it is when a dad doesn't have his health for him and his kids. And so I began to take all these strategies and this lifestyle and to refine it over a decade to make it like as simple as it can be to be effective, as sustainable as it can be, even more age appropriate for guys with aging joints. So it just came down to the memory of my dad paired with all of my deep experience with fitness. And also seeing that, like, I think men thrive in community, men thrive in groups of people who are elevating them and sharing that kind of energy. So I knew this was something that I wanted to gather guys to do this together. That together aspect is so powerful, and we lose it often when we start our families. Many of us have it when we're playing sports or when we're working in the office. And then there's this transition point where we feel like we're heads of household or we're on our own and we're just doing our own stuff. And that can be a little bit of a rut energy. So I just decided to blend the community with the strategies, and Fit Father's been refined ever since.
And then how do you go about helping people? So is it, I mean, you obviously have your doctorate, so I'm the story I'm telling myself is probably insanely detailed and very deliberate and very specific.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. I think there's a process, and the man that I help and the man that I design my programs to help is the dad who wants to do better with his fitness. It still has 30 plus pounds to lose, has had traction at sometimes, but falls off and hasn't found that real consistency. And to succeed for that guy, there's a couple components that need to be in place. The first thing is we need to do some deep foundational mindset work. We need to create powerful neuroassociations with health, because a lot of guys who say things like, I don't have time to exercise, or I don't have time to cook healthy food, I'm too busy. They're operating from a mental psychological framework where they see their health as something separate from the rest of their life. They see their health as a category of thing that is fundamentally different than, their everyday life. And the guys who succeed with health are the guys that find integration in their mindset. The guys who finally accept the fact that I have this body, I am human, I am embodied, and the quality of this body affects every experience that I have. It gives me the energy and clarity to do great at my job. It gives me the presence and the patience to be a great dad and be there with my kids. It gives me, the energy to go crush it financially. It gives me the inner feeling of wholeness and integrity. So the first thing we do in our program is we run guys through a deep mindset journaling reflection session that ultimately emerges as a mission statement. A mission statement where a guy really writes down what his core values in life are, sees clearly how his health is completely connected to all of that, how his health is connected to whatever values he has, sees clearly the costs of not making change, understands that there is a cost of making that change and that it's worth it. It is worth it. So From a neuroscience perspective, what we're really doing is we are activating the deeper areas of the brain, the limbic system, the deep kernel. Like the way the brain's structured, it's pretty amazing. If you take your thumb and kind of like wrap it in the middle and put your fingers on top of it, your thumb is this limbic area that we share with many deep creatures. Like reptiles have a limbic system. It is a subconscious emotional processing. We have the hippocampus, our memory center is in there. The amygdala, the fear center is in there. And what's happening is these deep areas are running subconscious processes that eventually bubble up as our desires, our actions, our habits. And we have the fingers that wrap on top. That's the prefrontal cortex. That's our executive function, our planning, our thinking, our logical areas of the brain. Most guys who fail are operating on the top layer only. They're only operating on the neocortex. And they're saying things like, oh, I just need to get clarity on the right kind of exercise plan. Oh, I just need to like understand that keto is the way and I need to control my blood sugars and eat these foods. I just need to hire this trainer. We're only working on the surface level. And what ultimately happens is when life pressures and frictions come up and that limbic system is not deeply aligned, you are going to fall off track. So we need to create integration in the basically the brain structure and the psychology that emerges from that. So the mission statement is the first part. And that's why we run the Fit Father Project, because for a lot of guys, they just need to face the music that what you're doing with your body is affecting your ability to be a great dad. If you can improve your health by 25 to 50%, you're going to be a better dad. At the very least, you just showing up with a powerful body and presence is going to be a good example for your kids. And there's a good chance if your kids are living today now, they are not as healthy as they could be. And so we are embodying the example of health and goodness and all the different things that could come from that. Just the ability to have lasting power and be around. The diseases we see some of our parents, if they're still alive, facing Alzheimer's, dementia, metabolic issues, heart disease, these are being laid down in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s. They just get harvested in terms of bad processes later. So the problem with the human psychology in terms of brain resources, we're really good at reacting to short-term problems. You get a flat tire, that's immediate. Something happens with your kid, they break their arm, that is immediate. We're not good, and we don't have a bias for long-term issues. And the body is a long-term game. The smoldering inflammation from eating the unhealthy foods that you know aren't great for you builds up over time, and it's small until it becomes big. And so we got to get guys out of the rut. You hear the stories. It's like, oh, I had the heart attack and I found I survived somehow. I got a new lease on life. Now I lost 100 pounds. That happens, but it doesn't always work out that way. So how can we get more psychological leverage before that? How can we get ahead of that? How can we change these neuroassociations? So that's the first start. That's the first step. And I'll continue, but I'll take a breath and I'll let you comment because I'm sure there's something that comes up from that.
I think that's key. I think the mindset thing is key because there is tremendous amount of guilt around just men taking care of themselves. And I'm not exactly, you might know this better than I do, even though like our backgrounds are very similar as it relates to health. I know that there's a guilt factor, but I don't know exactly what that is, or I do, I have my own opinion on what it is, but I'm curious as to you, why do men feel so guilty about taking care of themselves and it's like the last priority that we do?
Well, I think it's because a lot of guys haven't found integration into a system of living. So it feels like, one, you have so much time. You do feel you want to provide. You have many people a web of responsibilities that you must tend to. And if you don't have a system that integrates all this stuff, then it feels like you are taking time and energy away from these things to redirect it into your health. And you haven't also made the connection that, in fact, it's very selfless in a sense to get your health on point, because that enables you to show up long-term for the rest of these things. And I don't think it's just guilt. Like guilt might be, oh, I'm taking time away from other things to invest in my health. I think it's also shame. I think there's shame, and there's injured pride is another factor. Like a lot of guys, like even though they may not consciously say it, are not happy with how they look, not happy with the belly, want to wear a shirt on at the pool, or just feel like they lost their edge. This thing is called the dad edge. The edge means you are sharp. You are on the razor point of it. You are moving forward into progression instead of like falling back and really kind of like slowly dying. So and the guilt comes and when we don't have a system that allows us to, in a very time efficient way, take care of ourselves. The cool thing is you're going to be eating food every single day. You know, you're going to be eating food, and that's just a part of like how people live. And if we can just upgrade your nutrition system where it's super dialed in, it's sustainable, it doesn't take any more time, and it gives you clarity, like that alone, even if we don't take time and go bust our ass in the gym right now because we don't have the bandwidth for that, that alone can move the needle for you. So just seriously, just upgrading the food is kind of like the next step in the approach before we even get to exercise. And that can remove a lot of guilt. We also feel guilt when we are not doing things that we know we should do. If you know you want to eat healthy, you know you want to get healthier, and it's another day and you're having candy or sugary stuff in the middle of the day, you now feel like you're out of integrity with what your deep drive and desire. You recognize on some level that you're falling prey to these short-term cravings, and that is it's in the antithesis of your long-term goals. The word health, it comes from the old Germanic that means wholeness. It means wholeness. That's what it means. And wholeness partly is that the things we actually say we want to do, we're actually doing those. There's an integrity between feeling and vision and action. And when those things are aligned, that's they're aligned, we feel healthy. When they're not aligned, we feel guilt. Like a guy who's been addicted to porn, he knows he wants to get off it, but he relapses or he continues to go back and he feels guilt afterwards, you know, and we all can kind of like understand what that might be like. But unhealthy food is not too different than that. You know, we know we want to eat healthy, but we continue to find ourselves eating chips or sweets late at night. There's guilt because there's a lack of integrity. So what we help people do after the mindset component is develop a nutrition system. And this is actually an area where I think we're exceptionally good at, where we transcend talk of certain kinds of diets and dogma, and we help guys figure out their go-to foods, their go-to meals, how to integrate family time, free meals, cheat meals, how to navigate alcohol, how to make nutrition actually quite simple. And that's where we developed the Fit Father meal plan. And I'm happy to share as much as you like to get into on how we actually approach nutrition from like a systems thinking standpoint, because that's one of the most liberating things. Because the fact is, as you get older, nutrition is more important than exercise. You cannot out exercise a bad diet. If you're trying to bust ass doing CrossFit and strength train, but you're eating inflammatory, crappy foods, like it just doesn't work. But the converse actually does work. Like we have a lot of fit fathers who aren't big exercise guys, but they eat super healthy and they walk and they try to be a little more active. And we've seen guys lose 100 pounds without touching a dumbbell or a treadmill. Like that converse is possible.
Yeah, I would love to know more about the nutrition aspect of it, how you approach it, especially now, because I get the feeling that every single time, I mean, I know when I scroll through Instagram, I'm seeing, oh, there's the keto diet. Okay, there's the carnivore diet. Okay, there's the vegan diet. There's so many different things, and people are stating so many different things out there, especially with inflammation, right? I see that a lot. Like people are really, talking about foods that are inflammatory, and I think that there's just so much information out there that it's hard for people to really understand. Okay, well, there's all this information. So what do I do? So what do you tell people to do?
Well, I'll first state that there is a uniting through line that moves through all those different dietary approaches. Even something is like polarizing as, let's just say, a completely plant-based diet versus a completely carnivore diet. Like those are two opposite ends of the spectrum of what foods might be included in a diet. But the healthiest diets are diets that are based on natural, non-processed foods. Natural, non-processed foods. So this could look like fruits and vegetables. This could look like meats and eggs and dairy, like non-processed foods. And where we're really getting sick now is in boxed, ultra-processed foods. A lot of the grains, the seed oils, the artificial preservatives and flavorings, these are in the ultra-processed foods. So the diet must be based on natural foods, ideally single ingredient foods. Fruits, vegetables, eggs, meats, fish, cheese, nuts, like these kinds of things. Now, every person is going to respond differently to the combination of those things. We are all bio-individual, and we're going to see this a lot more as we get deeper into genetic and epigenetic testing. There's certain people that just feel better on a lower carbohydrate, higher animal product type thing. There's certain people that feel a little bit better on plant-based things. And I'll get into a little bit of that nuance in a second. The second thing your diet needs to do is regulate your blood sugar. Like, and this is just like the fact of life. Our bodies do run off of, we get glucose from the environment, in complex carbohydrates or, in fruits and vegetables. And in a healthy system, carbs are no problem. Like our body gets the influx of carbs, insulin does its thing, gets it into the cells, and we get back to baseline. Where we've gone wrong is having, insulin resistance, where we're eating constant sugar, we're snacking all the time, and the body's being bombarded with lots of this stuff. And so we got to have a diet that regulates blood sugar. That diet does not have to be ketogenic, but for most guys, I do recommend a slightly lower carbohydrate approach, which is just paring back on the amount of carbs you're eating. Although we have certain members who just want to drop the carbs completely, I'm telling you it's not necessary. In our Fit Father meal plan, we have guys eat sandwiches on a regular basis. You don't have to, but if you get some sprouted organic bread, like Ezekiel bread, and you threw some turkey, some avocado, some mustard, some greens on there, like, you know, that's a phenomenally healthy meal for people who feel good after they eat it, and that's totally fine. I think people's health will benefit from having things like organic berries in the diet. Those do not need to go. Like, you do not need to go completely keto to be successful. But if you find that you're such a sugar addict that even having berries, you know, opens you up into having all sorts of different sweets and crap, then hey, I respect it. You don't have to necessarily have that stuff. But I'd say the Fit Father meal plan, if we're going to talk a little more like specific macros, probably helps guys eat around 100 to 150 grams of carbohydrates per day. And I think dinner is actually the time to give guys a little more balance to have those carbohydrates. At dinner, we teach a framework of calling building a perfect plate. So basically, if you imagine a blank plate of food and you fill that half of that plate with some kind of fibrous vegetable that you love, it could be salad mix, it could be steamed broccoli, it could be asparagus, it could be sauteed peppers, like some kind of vegetable, half of that plate vegetable. A quarter of that plate with some kind of protein you love, any variety, and the final quarter of that plate with some kind of carbohydrate you love. So combinations that could work. We could have asparagus with salmon with some quinoa or rice. Easy. We could have a taco bowl with some ground beef that's mixed up with some sauteed vegetables, again, with some rice or maybe some cubed potatoes. We could do, you know, a steak with a potato with a little bit of a side salad. If you build a perfect plate in how I kind of described it, the cool thing is that's going to roughly be around 500 to 700 calories, which for most men to maintain weight, let's say the average guy is, you know, when he's lean could be 160 to maybe 220 pounds, somewhere in that range when a guy is lean. The most guys are probably going to be eating around 2,000 to 2,500 calories per day as we get older. The metabolism slows just a little bit. If you're more athletic and you're doing more activity, obviously those calorie figures will go higher. But if you think about it, if that's the general calorie target and a perfect plate ends up being around 700 calories or so, and now you have another, you know, 1,400 calories to budget throughout a couple meals, it's going to be really easy for you to be calorie balanced. So calorie balance is important. Now, the natural non-processed foods are also the foods that are anti-inflammatory in their nature. So, you know, you get the omega-3s from healthy eggs or from fish. You know, get spices like turmeric or curcumin, which are wonderful for that. You get all the plant-based polyphenols in the berries and all the things that are colorful. And just anything that is colorful in nature has compounds that are good for us in some way, shape, or form. So we help people figure out what their go-to meals are. Now, to make it a little more practical, what we help guys do is develop their meal timing schedule setup. Like, a lot of guys are reactive with their nutrition, so we help them be like, when are you eating your foods? Are you going to be a guy who likes to do intermittent fasting and you skip that first meal and you might have meal 1 at 11, a snack at 2, dinner at 6? Cool. That's a great routine. There's also a breakfast, lunch, snack, and dinner kind of setup. That's also great. But what we help them do is decide what their meal timing schedule setup is and slot in their go-to meals with a couple different things so they have like a simple plan to follow. So breakfast could be a power protein smoothie, or it could be eggs and berries, or eggs and avocado with a piece of Ezekiel toast. Lunch could be a salad with protein. And maybe you have things near your office like a Chipotle or a salad and go, or maybe you take leftovers from dinner and slot that into the lunch slot. For dinner, we like to give guys a little more variety because we believe with nutrition for consistency and sustainability, you need consistency and variety. You need these two factors. So we like to say early in the day, your first 1 to 2 meals of the day, make them make them dialed in. Because if we have a go-to breakfast that's healthy, that gives us protein and healthy fats and fiber and vitamins, and you just like slot that item in, the significance of that is like you've literally knocked out 1/3 of your meals that are now go-to and standardized. 2, let's say you messed up the day before and you ate some things, you went out and you had pizza and you didn't intend to, you are now an anchor to get back on the next day to like anchor back into something very consistent. And so we're big believers in go-to meals, and we help guys determine what those are in the meal plan.
What's your take on, and that, by the way, thank you. That was very, very clear. And I love the simplicity of it as well. Like having like go-to meals, and I'm visualizing like, hey, half your plate should be, you know, something that's like fibers, carbohydrates, a
Hmm.
quarter should be protein, another quarter should be like a starchy carb.
Hmm.
That obviously simplifies it quite a bit. What's your view of the necessary micronutrients that
Hmm.
someone that a man over 40 needs?
They're essential. I mean, I think we have a big focus right now on macros, which are proteins, carbs, fats. These are the things that make up the calorie load of a diet. The micronutrients are the vitamins and minerals that allow our cells to function optimally. And one of the biggest changes we've had is we've seen disease climb. There's many reasons for that, but we are not getting nearly as many micros. And this is that our produce is just not as rich because our soils are depleted from agriculture and farming. So what I believe, and the best way to do it, is to actually front load your micronutrients with your meal one, to come up with a meal number one that has the micros like loaded in there. So one of the things that guys do is they make our like Fit Father protein shake recipes, which we throw a bunch of crazy awesome stuff in there. You know, like it could be cacao and hemp seeds and berries and maybe some arugula and stuff like this. And it actually tastes amazing. It might sound crazy, but it tastes great. Your go-to meal one has the micros baked into there. I'm not opposed to guys having a simple basic multivitamin as a way to just blanket statement get your micros. Um, I also am a big believer in getting your minerals first thing in the morning before your meal. So one of the main habits we have guys do when they wake up is a rehydration habit, which is drinking at minimum 16, but up to 32 ounces of water within your first half hour of waking up. The body needs water first thing in the morning. It's dehydrated. Water is what we need. We don't necessarily need food. And we help guys load that up with some good micro minerals. So this could be in the most simple form, taking a pinch or maybe a quarter teaspoon of some pink Himalayan salt or some Celtic sea salt, which has trace minerals in it. It could be a more, a more, I guess, dialed in trace mineral supplement, but water and minerals first thing in the morning is really key for energy. I think if guys start doing that habit, they're going to feel a lot more energized in the morning. Often helps with the bowel movement. And then there's like some cool hacky stuff. Like, a lot of guys rely on coffee and stimulants in the morning. If you start throwing things like a raw organic cacao powder in a smoothie, holy crap, is that thing loaded with micronutrients, micro minerals. Like there's enough magnesium in cacao to like give you almost like your daily value through a couple tablespoons of that. So there's some things you can build your micronutrients into your diet. And I think the cool approach to that is that dinner then can be, just a little more open and relaxed. And if you're doing a perfect plate and you have half that plate with some kind of fibrous veggie, you're going to get micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals in those foods. If you're eating in a high animal protein diet, those organic meats or fishes have micronutrients in them as well. But I guess like to state it very simply again, baking those into your first meal of the day is great. And you want to know probably the single richest easiest source of micronutrients on the planet? It is a high quality egg with the egg yolk. Like you open up a carton of eggs, like a good carton of eggs where the yolk is like orange, and look on the nutrition label. Like an egg is a freaking multivitamin. The yolk itself is like a multivitamin. I know with my young daughter, if I can get 1 or 2 egg yolks into her body every day, she pretty much has most of her B vitamins. She has vitamin E. She's getting some iodine. She's getting omega-3 fatty acids. She's getting so many beautiful micros. So again, best in slot. Can you get those into your first meal of the day? And you don't need to think about it quite as much. In terms of supplements that I think are just blanket statement good for guys, a multivitamin or some kind of greens powder or some kind of micronutrient based powder is a good idea for kind of like an insurance policy. A couple bucks a day seems good. Creatine monohydrate is a supplement I recommend for almost every guy, even if you're not trying to bulk up and lift. It provides ATP for your brain. It's just phenomenal. It's just good for longevity and cognitive health. It gives you more energy. I think it is good to get a potent source of natural anti-inflammatories in your diet. This could be omega-3s from a fish oil or from eating cold water fatty fish. This could be taking a turmeric or curcumin supplement or baking that spice into what you cook. And I'm also a big fan of ginger. I think we've kind of lost, as we moved into ultra processed foods, we've lost this art of understanding spices and adding these things to our foods. Ginger is a super potent supplement for its anti-inflammatory and digestive health benefits. So how can you just start to add that into your family's cooking? Like I'm an Italian dude, so I make some homemade pesto. I got a little pesto bush and I grow it and I make pesto. And so in that pesto, I will throw the basil, which anything that smells good has these terpenes and aromatic compounds that are beneficial for us. I throw pine nuts, a high quality olive oil, some sea salt, and I blend that thing up and we throw that on our perfect plates. And I know I'm just getting so many good compounds from that. So I guess I'm trying to expand people's minds to say, what are some other like go-to spices and go to flavoring options that are actually really healthy for our family, and how can you just upgrade that a new best in slot item?
Oh man, I love that. That is really, really cool. As far as the consistency with like lifting, I want to
Mm-hmm.
get to that here in a second, but creatine, I want to talk about that for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I just recently added that in when I started 75 hard, almost over 100 days ago now. I'm still doing it. I
Nice.
just love the program actually. Like I'm one of those sick, twisted people, but I noticed that, so I started taking creatine. I had not taken creatine in years. And I was a little leery of it. I was like, man, I don't want to be like watered down. I don't want to be like feeling like full. And I completely and totally forgot how great I feel when I take creatine.
Oh
Like
yeah,
from a mental aspect, I feel sharp, I feel productive. Like from a lifting aspect, like strength and endurance, and like I feel like $1 million. What exactly is, like I realize it has to do with ATP and it
yep.
allows all that good stuff, but like how does it actually benefit us? Like what does it do?
Perfect. So ATP, I want to make sure people understand this, because ultimately what we're finding is for health and longevity and performance, we need our cells to be healthy. And our inside our cells are these things called mitochondria, which many of us have heard of. They ultimately are the end destination of all the food we eat and the metabolism we get, is to get resources to the mitochondria so they can produce ATP. ATP is like cellular energy. It's the molecule that our cells use to carry out all their key functions. So anything that increases the amount of ATP we have is basically giving us more energy. Um, Creatine does that directly. It works in something called the creatine phosphate pathway and gives us ATP. So in the muscles, it gives us the ability to produce more power, get a few extra reps, and just it helps with physical performance in the muscles. In the brain, when the brain has more ATP, you get greater clarity of thinking, you get less brain fog. It probably protects neurons when there's more ATP. In fact, there's some research that shows that when someone does not sleep well and they have brain fog the next day, 3 to 5 grams of creatine is one of the most reliable ways to reverse that brain fog. They also give creatine to seniors who are not exercising, like people 70, 75 plus, and they actually maintain muscle mass better because creatine has some kind of direct signaling in the protein synthesis pathway. Where you take creatine, it's not just like it helps you perform better and lift more. It actually activates some of these pathways through this myostatin pathway that helps you build muscle. So creatine can just help you gain more muscle mass, and it's safe to take at like 3 to 5 grams. I laugh when I think back to my bodybuilding days many decades ago, where there used to be products called like Cell Tech, which was like 10 grams of creatine loaded with like 50 grams of sugar. And you take like 20 grams of creatine a day for some days, these loading protocols. Basically, all you need to do now is take 3 to 5 grams of creatine, which is going to be a couple teaspoons per day at any time. It's not like you can miss a day. It's all good. There's creatine found in foods. Red meat is a high source of creatine. So people eating carnivore diet probably get benefit from having high natural creatine. But man, it's just a powder that's good to have. It's so cheap. Just get creatine monohydrate. And there's nothing more fancy that needs to be done, but just add it to your morning hydration ritual, get some creatine in, and it's kind of as simple as that. And I'll say, I actually have produced one of the best videos on creatine on YouTube. If you type in Balduzzi creatine, I think the video might have close to 1 million views. And I kind of go through all the science of creatine on a whiteboard. So you can check that out as well.
Oh man, that is awesome. I love that. Um, yeah, it's amazing. Like when I started taking creatine again, I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe like I went this long without it. Like I forgot how great I feel on it. And it is so cheap. And every
Safe for kids
morning,
too. Safe for kids.
yeah,
You got high
is it
school
really?
athletes, give them some creatine. Yeah.
Okay. You know, it's interesting. Like every morning I have the same routine. I take a packet of first form electrolytes and
Yep.
I mix it with, and it doesn't have any calories, but it's got all the magnesium and sodium and
Yep.
all that good stuff. and then I'll put my scoop of 5 grams creatine in there and just shake
Perfect.
it up, slam it.
Yep.
And and then I go off to the gym. I feel great. Do you know anything about peptides?
Oh yeah. I've used them in many kinds. So there's specific peptides. You want me to speak generally about them?
Just generally, like, because I know that these are kind of newer, right? As
Yep.
far as like what people are using them for, but like, do you recommend peptides? And if so, what do they do? What kind?
Okay. Well, let's define it first. So our bodies are made up of protein. Like these are kind of like Lego building blocks. Like ultimately we're built of protein. And when we hear protein and we think like, why does chicken have protein? Well, chicken is like a muscle meat and it has these protein structures that make up the chicken's muscle. We eat it. And in the process of digestion, our body cuts up those long proteins into amino acids that we then absorb. We've also heard of these amino acid powders. These are just like the individual Lego blocks themselves. And some of these we need to get from our diet because we can't make them. Some of these are very important for muscle building. Leucine is the main amino acid that triggers muscle protein synthesis. It's one of the branch chain amino acids. You might see BCAAs as a supplement people take for leucine purposes. I just want to give you the landscape. Proteins are long structures of amino acids chained up. Amino acids themselves are the building blocks. Peptides are not quite as long as a protein, but not individual amino acids. So they're just a stack of a couple of them that's like a short chain of a protein is what a peptide could be. So I think it's important to just define what that is. A peptide is a short string of amino acids. And so when you define it generally like that, you can understand how there's like literally probably thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of different peptides that the body uses to do different things. It's using a chain of different amino acids that have different effects on the body. Insulin itself is a peptide. It is a short string of amino acids. When we hear people say, oh, I'm taking peptides, they're typically taking a couple common ones that we've discovered that have very potent biological effects. The classes of peptides that you see out there, they're peptides for healing, peptides that when taken increase our ability to recover from injuries. Two very common ones are going to be BPC 157, and another one might be TB 500. These are just like trade names of those amino acid sequences. And when we take these, either orally in the case of BPC or an injection in the case of TB 500, it increases our body's healing response, meaning we recover faster. We have, old injuries can kind of go away. I can't say they're miracles. They work better for some people and in certain scenarios. But if you are someone who has an old injury or, you're kind of feeling beat up, it could be worth to use some of these healing peptides. They have very good safety profiles. They're not the kind of things like testosterone where if you take it externally, it's going to shut down your body in some sense. They do not have those kinds of feedback loops. But there are some peptides that are more related to hormone production. Common peptides might be like sermorelin or ipamorelin. These are peptides that actually act in the brain and signal you to release more growth hormone, for example. So those peptides you can say are a little more quote unquote intense than maybe a peptide for just healing and increasing healing. Peptides that do modulate your hormones. There are peptides you can take that make your skin more tan. They're like melanin related peptides that you can take, and they can kind of give you a tanning effect without actually being in the sun.
Huh, I had no idea.
There are so many different types of them. The cool thing about the landscape of peptides right now is there's a lot of just like anecdotal evidence on the forums of people showing their stacks, what they took, how much they take, and the benefits they're getting. I consider them a lot less intense than someone considering doing like steroids or taking hormones. I think they can certainly be beneficial. But I'm also very leery of anything that people start to put on a pedestal as like the external source of your success. When foundationally, like the centenarians that are like crushing it, they're like in their 100 years old or they're in their late 90s and they're like fit and healthy and eating foods. Like these people are not taking peptides. Maybe they benefit from them, but the foundations of a healthy lifestyle, good circadian rhythm balance, exercise, all these things are like more foundational than peptides. If you don't have those blocks nailed, that's where you start. But for a guy like you, Larry, where you're like dialed in and you're like, I have some old injuries, I want to heal faster, then like the BPC TB 500 would be a good thing to run. You'd probably only need to run it for about 8 to 10 weeks. And then you probably are good to go.
So these things like peptides, like, are they meant to only take temporarily and then you take time off?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are cycled. A lot of them are cycled for sure. There are probably some peptides you can just take on a constant, ongoing basis, but most of them are a cycle type thing.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, because I know those are kind of newer and to well, maybe they're not. I don't know. How long have they been around? I don't even know.
In that, well, we've known about peptides for, probably maybe 100 years, maybe more. Like in a research setting, we're just living in an interesting time where like research is now becoming like commercially applicable, and it's like the wild, wild west. We can just get stuff through the internet. So I think they've really kind of exploded onto the scene of using it in the last 5, 10 years.
Got it. Okay. And then let me ask you this. So if how does the Fit Father project actually work? So like for instance, I know you've helped over the years, you've helped over 60,000 people in 100 countries. Um, but how does a man get started with Fit Father?
So basically, you know, for the guys who go to our website, fitfather.com or fitfatherproject.com, will get you to the same place. And you're like, I like this guy. I want to get healthy and fit. And I see the systematic approach. When a guy joins, the first thing we do is we get him into the program area in the community. So you get access to the FitFather app, which is available phone, web, whatever. And inside the app, there is the step-by-step initial process that we call FF30X that walks you through, first off, mission statement, like a step-by-step process of creating that. Then getting on the nutrition plan, which is helping you demystify everything, how to get it all dialed in for you. Then you start our initial month of workouts, which we didn't talk a ton about exercise, but the kind of exercise that we love to do for Fit Fathers is a combination of strength training plus cardio plus mobility into these short, like 30 to 40-minute sessions, where you can get it all in and a lot of functional movements. It improves your fitness very quickly. And so all the workouts are laid out there. And then our coaches are talking to you from day one. Like you get a message from our team. We're answering all your questions, following you through, and then you're part of the group of all the guys doing it together. So more or less, it's like a complete system that's kind of like in the palm of your hand that you follow through initially. And then we have the ongoing program that could take you through a full year transformation and beyond. We have many Fit Fathers who've been with us for 5+ years, still loving it, still doing the new weekly workouts. And I think above all, like it's this just amazing supportive community of like-minded men who are all on fitness. So we're constantly breathing into each other with inspiration. But it's a step-by-step program that's delivered, wherever you're at. Guys join from all over the world and they follow the structure. They get the systems developed for themselves with nutrition, exercise, mindset, and then we keep you accountable. Because I think a thing that people think about with fitness is that they don't realize the seasonality of it. Like as the year progresses, you're doing different stuff in January than you are in July, than you are when the holidays come around. So what we really help you do is navigate each year, the turning of that wheel. We help you constantly realign, constantly get on track, come hang out and do events that engage you, whether they're races and runs. Like we just had a bunch of Fit Fathers up in Minnesota. We did a 200-mile Ragnar relay for those that wanted to participate. We're doing fun stuff in the community. So it's a program, it's a community, it has an online component, but also we're a team of, there's about 10 of us and we're interfacing with all of our members. So you're actually working with real people, and it's more affordable than an hour of personal training per month. So that's a really cool benefit.
I love it, man. How can men find you and find more information about it?
So check out fitfather.com or fitfatherproject.com. And if you want to just jump straight up into the program is FF30X. That's like the first 30 days we'll run you through. And we basically walk you through the step-by-step process. And you can feel so fantastic in the next 30 to 45 days, not just physically, but with clarity. And we also have a free plan on the site. If you just want to join the email list, we'll give you a free 1-day meal plan and a free workout. So you can get a sample of that as well. That's fitfather.com or fitfatherproject.com. And if you're a YouTube guy, also you can check out and subscribe to the Fit Father YouTube channel. I think I have like over 600 videos on all a bunch of topics as well. But again, I think one of the cool things about Fit Father is it moves people out of the malaise or the blaze of all this information, and it moves you into like action and structure and here's what to do, not just like here's more info. So I do suggest if guys are inspired from this convo, just check out the program. We have a 30-day guarantee too. So love it in the first 30 days or you don't have to pay.
That's awesome, man. And by the way, if you guys check out fitfatherproject.com, I'm actually looking at it right now, that there's all kinds of testimonials, before and after pictures, resources, all kinds of really fantastic stuff. And Anthony, I should have asked you this, but your doctorate degree, I mean, I saw on your website here that you're wearing scrubs. So like, but what is your doctorate actually in?
So I did, well, first off, my undergrad, I went to University of Pennsylvania. I got a degree in psychology with an emphasis on metabolic neuroscience and with a minor in nutrition. And then moved back to Arizona, where my family's from, and I went to Naturopathic Medical School, which is in NMD. We have a kind of medicine approach that's very holistic, natural approaches when possible. We do prescribe when necessary, but it's not like the frontline approach of the medicine. And we really do a lot of lifestyle, nutrition, exercise stuff, which I know is what men need today. We don't need more statins. We don't need more external stuff. We need to get on a healthy lifestyle. That's, there's a famous quote. I forget who said it, but it was, the doctor of the future will prescribe the least medicine. It might have been like a Thomas Jefferson kind of person. And man, are we far from that. So I'm a naturopathic physician, and I help people get healthy and honestly get off a lot of medications too.
That's good stuff, man. I love that. And then I'm curious. I know you have a daughter. How old is
Yeah.
she?
She's about to turn 3.
About to turn 3. Okay. So as we wrap up here, I would love for you, you have taken us through an incredible journey. And I want to thank you for that. Like everything from you having this life altering experience, losing your own father at 10 years old, seeing him, have a seizure and then brain cancer and then passing away at 42 years old. And then, you being only 10 years old and then going through this, you see your mom step up, become a day trader. Then she meets a guy like Jim and he really steps in and helps you as a young man. And now, you're raising your own daughter. You have your doctorate degree in this. You're helping 60,000 plus people get fitter, physically, mentally, emotionally. But as we cap off this interview, what is just one piece of advice that you have for men out there who are just fathers, just trying to make it, husbands just trying to make it?
I think a big aspect in today's society, and maybe in past cultures too, is men are containers of responsibility. Like, we go hunt and we provide, we work. And in the process, I think, guys, we lose ourselves a little bit. Like, we put ourselves on the back burner. We forget about our needs. We forget about our body. We forget about our growth and development. And we feel so burnt out that we take our excess energy for the day and, we pop down on the couch and we watch the football or we watch the Netflix with the family. And there's a cultural malaise right now that has led to 50% of dads, maybe even more, being unhealthy and overweight. So what that tells me is that if you continue doing everything else that everyone's doing, going with the current, it leads to being unhealthy, being a product of a system of pharmaceutical medications and fake foods. And so my piece of advice is to really, really reflect from this conversation today on what health means to you. Maybe remember back to when you were a kid, wherever you grew up, running around your neighborhood, riding your bike, feeling connected to your body and to the natural energy that we have. If you want to know what makes the man healthy, it is getting closer to natural law. It is getting closer to understanding that this human body is inextricably linked to nature. We now know about sleep and circadian rhythm, which means we need to be in connection with the sun coming up and the sun going down. We know that the foods that grow from this earth are the foods that are nourishing for us. We know that all the stuff that's moving us away from this natural cycle, the unnatural medications, the unnatural foods, is leading us to poor health. So you got to connect to that. You got to connect to that deeply in your heart, and you got to extend that connection to your family. It all starts with this heart and this connection, because if you don't get that root right now, you're going to be a byproduct of the pressures and the currents of culture. And the end of your life, your health will be one of your greatest metrics of wealth. And so I just hope that guys create health first in their heart and their mindset, And then also understand that you don't have to do this alone. There are people like me who have figured out the path to get you healthy. And, the last thing I'll share is like all the best athletes have coaches. I'm sure Kobe Bryant had multiple coaches, shooting coach, defensive coach. They lean into getting coaching. Guys, we forget at certain points that we can get coaching and support too. We can kind of treat ourselves in this way. And so get some help, brother. Like there are people who can help you, and you don't have to be the one to figure this out all alone. So that's my final closing message.
Love that, man. I love that. And I agree with you. I mean, there's too many resources in this day and age to try to figure it out by yourself. I mean, anytime now that I'm stuck on something, I'm like, who's the person that can help me? Because
Mhm.
that is the fastest, most efficient, most effective, and least amount of stress is for
Yeah,
someone to just, hey, I've already paved the way. All you have to do is follow where I point you,
totally.
and you'll get the same results. So I love that, man. Well, Anthony, this has been awesome, man. Guys, we're going to have all the links in the show notes for you. If you go to the dadedge.com/496 for this show, again, the dadedge.com/496, you'll find all of Anthony's links there. If you want to check out the Fit Father Project, where he has helped, like he said, over 60,000 people achieve their best health, along with over 100 countries. So it's not just in the US. So you can be living somewhere else and work with Anthony as well. But Anthony, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, sharing your expertise around so many different things as it relates to our best selves. So I appreciate you coming on, brother.
You're welcome. Thanks, Larry.
You bet. Gentlemen, like I said, head on over to the dadedge.com/496 for this show. Go out, live legendary. Take care.